הפעם איתנו אורחת יקרה במיוחד, והיא הליידי אנבל ויידנפלד, שהייתה בת זוגו של רובינשטיין בערוב ימיו. שלום, אנבל.
שלום, אריק.
We would like to speak with you about Rubinstein in Israel, his wonderful relations with us. We were so privileged to have him always with us. His first visit in the Holy Land was in the year...
I think it was in the early 20s, like 1923, 24. And he was playing in Egypt, he was playing in Greece, and he made a special visit to Israel without having concerts prearranged. Tel Aviv was a little city with some 6 streets, no hall, and they right away wanted to have him to play, and in the end they improvised a concert in a hangar, in an aircraft hangar, and they had people standing up. There were no seats for them to sit on, and there were about 1,000 people there to listen to him.
You know, later on he came to us, and I was privileged to meet him, even to play for him, but he was for me always as a young old man. But here, when he came to Israel for the first time, he was really young.
Well, he was, yes. It was the early 20s, so, you know, he was, yes.
And we would like to see and to hear his playing as a young man.
Yes.
Annabel, in the year 79, you came with him to Jerusalem for a master class. How old was he by that time?
He was 92.
He was 92.
He was 92, yes. And we used to come a lot to Israel, and he used to bring me for my birthday. In fact, the first time I came to Israel in 1977 was with him, and he took me all over. We went to kibbutzim, we went everywhere. He showed me the whole country.
That was your birthday present?
Yes, yes.
And in 79, this was a master class in Jerusalem.
Yes. In fact, he did a series of master classes, and he adored it. He loved the contact with the young. He used to say, they're my young colleagues. I'm not teaching them. We are having an exchange. Sometimes I can learn something from them. He was wonderful with the young.
And he was so generous to them. However, in one case, he became a little hard, and we would like to watch this moment.
Right.
Too pompous a little bit, too much. It's forte, all right, but it is noble, and this is a little banging, you know. Don't do that. And Chopin doesn't go, you know, no. It's good for Liszt. In Liszt you can go on like that, but Chopin doesn't allow that. It is heavy, you know. It is not right. The theme is very slow before, doesn't it? The first time. Lyrical. And here it is simply the greater passion, you know, the greater emotion, but not pam 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 ti ta ta la ya la pa ya na pam tam tam pa la. No, it's much too much. Give it go, you know, very fine, forte, fortissimo if you want, not too much. Because it sounds banging, you know. Look out for that. And then the other thing, you know, I can't.
You know, Annabel, he was always so supportive and encouraging, and here, all of a sudden, another out of Rubinstein.
Well, I tell you, Arik, you mustn't forget that for him, you see, music was so important. If he felt someone didn't do justice, it would get him in a terrible rage. He would react the same if he was listening to a recording, even a quartet playing. And he used to say that the worst thing for him was if people made you, the way they played, made you feel that the composer was a less good composer. And this, for him, was an absolute crime, and he would get very excited and very upset.
Simplicity was the name of the game for him. Simplicity. I remember this masterclass, we were two of us there, and always he said noble and simple. When it was pompous, not for him.
Absolutely. He would get very upset if he felt anything was pompous. And don't forget, too, that he was such a natural musician. Everything had to come out naturally. And he would get, yes, very upset.
And when he played, just a few minutes ago, the Polonaise, which in a way is pompous, but he didn't do it pompously, so to speak. It was just noble and big.
Exactly. He always felt pomposity was counterproductive in playing, yes.
We would like to see Rubinstein now in a different lesson, in something more gentle.
You know that he named his preludes, his estampes, his images and all that with fantasy, you know. Sometimes it's a little absurd. There's a piece called La terrasse des audiences du clair de lune. But this one, you see, I feel it always as a little tragedy of a goldfish, you know, or something. It is a soft little thing. He's happy. It's not so abrupt, not so brusque. You see, young piri, piri, pam, pim, pam, piri, pam, pim, pam, 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 pim, pam, it's a happy mood, you know. It's played in a piano, not brusque, not no. Yes. You know, all that is very nice until the moment. It is not staccato, I know. Not staccato you play, no. I played it. That means maybe he was happy about the sun, or maybe he was in love with another fish, you know, I doesn't know, but it's an expression there of tenderness, you know. It should come out, you know. And then, you see, comes this quiet there and so on, a quiet noon or something, and then suddenly he's caught, you know. Boom! Hey, terrible tragedy, you know. And then comes in a whiny place, you know, his theme again, you know, and then there's a feeling that he tries to get off that, you know, but he can't. So that must be tentative, you know, at piano. Would you mind playing a little bit with the vision of a little more peacefully, a little more harmoniously, a little more lovingly, you know, not so sharp. All right, let's see.
Wasn't he a wonderful raconteur? How he can tell a story.
Yes, and you know, he so loved doing those classes that, in fact, he didn't even want to break for lunch. I remember we had a very, very late lunch that day, and he said to me, you know, all these students are so well taught. They must have had a very good teacher, and I have a feeling that you were the teacher.
Tell me, could you recognize yourself in the background?
I'm afraid I could, yes.
I must say,
unfortunately.
that was almost 30 years ago.
I'm afraid so, yes. We mustn't count.
You look younger today. Congratulations.
Don't believe it.
This was the first time I met you.
Yes, I remember that very well. Yes.
We cannot forget those moments.
No, no.
How he demonstrated, how he sat at the piano.
Yes, and how impressed he was with the center and with the sound and with so much talent there. All these young people had so much talent.
Yeah. Another girl played for him a Scriabin prelude.
It was very lovely. I liked it very much. But you know, you put on that rubato expression. One mustn't overdo it, you know. If you do every time, pam, pa, 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 pam, 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 pa, you know, it becomes too used, you know. You have to use it when it's really required, you know. It would be better if you make it rare, you know. Pim, pam, 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 pim, pam, pam, pim, pim, pam, pam. Well, there is a big expression, you see. But if you do it all the time, it wears off a little bit, you know. One can't express all the time the same way. There's always a crescendo in your feelings, you know. Each chord ought to sound, you see, articulated. Pam, 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 pam. That then it sings, you see, simply.
He had many friends in Israel, did he?
He did have quite a few friends, and I was lucky enough to meet them. A very dear, great friend was, of course, Teddy Kollek, and, of course, Esther Rubin, well, both Rubins, but I was only lucky enough to meet Esther Rubin. And Golda Meir came and had tea with us, and I remember going out to buy a cheesecake, and she ate the whole lot when she came to tea. And Menachem Begin was a very, very close friend. They used to write to each other, correspond a lot. And I was lucky enough, in fact, to visit him the day that he was given the Nobel Prize with Sadat. And we arrived at the house, and he was calling Sadat to congratulate him. These were very exciting times, and these were wonderful people
And then one day came our dear friend Jascha Bistritsky with the idea to have the Rubinstein competition. In fact, Jascha was a very keen amateur photographer, and one of his most beautiful photos is this photo of Rubinstein with a hat, with a cigar.
That was taken in Venice, actually.
And then, ever since, we have the Rubinstein competition. And one of the good prize winners, first prize winner, is Sasha Gavrilyuk, who is going to play for us an etude by Chopin.
Wonderful.
You know, Annabel, Rubinstein passed away 26 years ago, but I feel that he's still with us on the screen. He's so vivid. And sometimes I would like him to play again the same etude for the sake of the young pianists so that they can learn something. Annabel, as I said before, for us, Rubinstein is alive. We can watch him, we can listen to him. He's here, he's in the CDs. But for you today, how do you remember him?
Well, funnily enough, it's not a question of remembering him because he is always there. He is there, present in everything that I do, every day, every hour of every day. I've been incredibly fortunate. I'm wonderfully happily married. And Rubinstein is totally alive for me. His spirit is always there. And I just feel his presence. I'm sure he's there.
Zubin Mehta could describe better than anybody else the special relationship of Rubinstein and Israel and Rubinstein and the Philharmonic Orchestra.
At the age of 25, when I was suddenly told to substitute for Fritz Reiner in Los Angeles as a guest conductor, and that my soloist would be Arthur Rubinstein in Brahms's first concerto. I had only conducted this concerto once before, and I went as prepared as I could, and the simplicity and the most natural way of communicating that this great gentleman had completely floored me, put me at ease, so that I gave my best, even though at the age of 25, conducting this very difficult concerto, I can't even remember what my best might have been then. He was so kind, and whenever he had to correct me, and that many times during the rehearsal, when he wanted orchestra to play differently, or it was too loud, or if the phrase wasn't quite rounded off, he would say it in the most gentlemanly manner and not look down upon me. And this relationship continued always until the last time he played with me, which was the same concerto in Israel when we recorded it and of course played it in concert. Between these two dates of the Brahms first concerto in Los Angeles and Tel Aviv, there were umpteen occasions where he played practically his whole repertoire. Mozart, Beethoven's, Chopin, and not only that he was so gracious as a performer and giving as an artist, but listening to him interpret the great masters, and for me to correlate it in the symphonies of those masters I would conduct, was the greatest lesson I learned in my youth from Arthur Rubinstein. He was also extremely dedicated to Israel, never took a penny for any of the performances he did with the orchestra, and also helped us out on our tours with fundraising concerts in London and Paris, where from one Rubinstein concert we would pay the deficit of our whole tour. We are forever grateful to Arthur Rubinstein for the great musicianship that he imbued us with, for the gentleman that he was, and a friend that I'm proud to say that I was to this great master. I loved him all my life.
I'm sure, Annabel, that you recognize where this interview was taken.
Of course, at the Mann Auditorium in the artist room, which I think is called the Arthur Rubinstein room, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed, the Rubinstein room at Mann Auditorium, Echal HaTarbut.
And he showed it to me with great pride when we first came here.
And the picture in the
beautiful
background,
portrait.
a wonderful portrait. I remember the opening concert of Mann Auditorium. Rubinstein played for us, played the Emperor and then the triple concerto. And ever since he came so often to Israel, so many friends, the contacts. Tell us more about some visits.
Well, his visits always meant, I mean, Israel itself meant a great deal to him. Whenever I was reading to him, when he couldn't read himself anymore, it was the news from Israel which interested him the most. And when it was bad news, it would put him in a bad mood for quite a while. When it was good news, it would make him very elated. And his contact with Israel, he always felt every time he came, he was representing his father, who never came to Israel. And it was always deep in his heart, Israel. And that was why he also, of course, chose to be buried in Israel. And that was arranged, thank goodness, according to his wishes. There's the beautiful Mitzpeh Rubinstein near the Yad Kennedy outside Jerusalem. And his visits to Israel meant an enormous amount to him.
Yeah. I'm holding a photo which is maybe the dearest photo that I have. It is a meeting with Rubinstein and with a very young pianist by the name of Yefim Bronfman, who played for Rubinstein, and Rubinstein liked him, and maybe he was the first one to recognize him. And I shall keep this photo for the rest of my life as my most precious one. Thank you so much, Annabel, for being with us. Thank you indeed. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Arik. Toda rabah.